I remember the night as if it's still breathing behind my eyes. The prairie stretched endlessly, silvered under a fragile moon, every blade of grass trembling in the fog that crept low across the ground. A cold wind hummed through the skeletal trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and something older, something watching. I had walked far from the faint glow of my truck, following a path only I seemed to see. The silence wasn't empty, it was listening. Shadows twisted in the corners of my vision, shapes that seemed almost human, but wrong, too tall, too still. Every rustle of dry grass, every whisper of the wind, felt like a warning I couldn't understand. And then, just beyond the fog, I saw it. The prairie stretched endlessly, pale under the weak light of early evening. A thin fog hovered low, clinging to the blades of grass, curling around my ankles. The air smelled damp, a faint iron tang hidden beneath the wet earth. I walked slowly, my boots pressed into the soft, yielding soil. Each step echoed in the silence, swallowed almost immediately by the thick haze. The fog thickened with every breath I took, curling like smoke around my shoulders. It blurred the road ahead until I could no longer see where it ended. Even the trees along the horizon vanished into a gray nothingness. I thought I heard it first, just a sigh, a flutter in the air, a whisper, my own name carried by the wind, soft, deliberate. I stopped. The mist wrapped around me, heavier now, almost tangible. Nothing moved, only the rustling grass beside the road. A faint shape flickered just beyond sight, pale, shifting, almost human, almost familiar. I held my breath. The silence pressed close, like a living thing. It was waiting. The hairs on my arms prickled. A chill slid across my neck, soft as a fingertip, then gone. The whisper came again, closer this time, slipping under my ribs. I turned. Nothing. The fog was thick enough to taste, wet on my lips, clinging to my tongue. It swirled around my face, curling in patterns I couldn't follow. Somewhere a leaf quivered, brushing the ground with a soft, deliberate rhythm. I should have been afraid, but my fear slowed, morphed into curiosity. I wanted to see what waited just beyond the gray. A shape moved, not solid, not shadow, but a shimmer in the fog, like a reflection on water. It drifted closer, or I drifted closer to it. I could not tell. My footsteps were careful, almost soundless. Every footfall felt like it might break the spell around me. The prairie seemed to hold its breath, holding me in the same suspended moment. Then the whisper again, almost intimate, brushing my ear. It carried the weight of something that knew me, something patient. The mist shifted, curling into forms that almost resembled faces, pale, unblinking, and then gone when I tried to focus. The air smelled faintly of wet wool, and something sharper, iron-like. I thought I saw a movement to my left, slow, gentle, like someone circling me, careful not to disturb the quiet. A soft hum, almost beneath hearing, wound around my bones. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly. Nothing met my fingertips, only the fog, damp and unyielding. I turned again, and the road ahead seemed longer, stretching into impossibility. Each step became heavier, slower, as though the mist was holding me back. And still the whisper, soft, deliberate, traced along my spine. I want to call out. My throat ached, dry and small, and no words came. The wind carried only my name, drawn out and hollow, like an echo in a cavern. Somewhere in the fog, the shape lingered. It didn't move closer, not in the way I expected. It hovered, waiting. I felt a soft brush against my sleeve. Not solid, not sharp, just a suggestion of contact. My heart slowed, unsure if it wanted to race or stop entirely. The road bent slightly, unseen beneath the haze. I followed, compelled, though every step felt heavier than the last. The fog whispered again, then fell silent, leaving a ringing in my ears. And then, just beyond sight, the shape faded. Not running, not retreating. Just gone. The air smelled cleaner now, the iron tang receding into the damp earth. Only the prairie remained, stretching pale and empty beneath the faint light. I was alone, yet not entirely. I took a breath. The mist lingered around me, soft and deliberate. And though the whisper had gone, I knew it would wait, always waiting, just beyond the fog. The grove appeared suddenly, like a secret carved into the land. Tall pines rose around me, their trunks dark and slick in the pale light. The ground smelled of damp needles and earth, a soft, mossy scent that clung to my shoes. I stepped in slowly. Each footfall pressed into the carpet of fallen pine, muffled, absorbed. The wind shifted, but the shadows between the trees moved against it. I stopped, a flicker at the edge of my vision. Something there, but gone when I looked. The shadows stretched long, unnaturally still, as if the grove itself had paused. A chill drifted along my neck, brushing through my hair. I felt watched, though nothing breathed behind me. The air was thick, dense with quiet. Each breath tasted faintly of sap and something metallic. My heartbeat slowed, steadying as curiosity crept in. Another step forward. Soft, deliberate, the rustling needles beneath my feet sounded impossibly loud in the hush. A flicker again to my left, a shape pale and trembling at the corner of my vision. When I looked, only the dark trunks remained, rigid and unyielding. The shadows seemed to have their own rhythm. They didn't sway with the wind, didn't bend to the light. They lingered, shifting just beyond comprehension, patient. I paused, listening. The grove exhaled around me, a slow, damp hum that pressed against my chest. I could feel the cold seeping through my jacket, tickling my skin. Each step brought the sensation of soft, unseen footsteps behind me. Not quick, not chasing, just following, careful, deliberate. The flicker returned, closer this time, a shimmer along the edge of a pine, like water trembling in sunlight. I tried to focus, and it dissolved into the shadow, leaving only the whisper of movement. The trunks leaned slightly, or perhaps my mind did. Shapes emerged in the darkness, subtle, fleeting. Eyes that weren't there, faces I imagined, and then nothing. The air was still again. I could hear the hum of the forest beneath my ears, a quiet pulse. The smell of pine resin thickened, almost sweet, almost cloying. I wanted to step back, but my legs felt slow, reluctant. Every movement was deliberate, careful, as if the grove demanded patience. The shadows shifted again, slow and purposeful, following no wind, no pattern I could see. A soft brush against my sleeve, gentle, fleeting like a thought. I froze. The chill lingered along my spine, creeping down to my fingertips. I walked on, slowly, careful not to turn my head too quickly. The flicker appeared one last time, pale and still, at the corner of the grove. I could almost make out a shape, thin, trembling, but as I focused, it was gone. Only the darkness remained. Silence pressed against me, heavy and close. The hum of the trees faded, leaving the grove stillness thick around my chest. The wind whispered faintly, brushing through the needles overhead. I breathed in the damp, pine-scented air. The shadows waited. Not threatening, not urgent, just patient. I left the grove slowly, careful not to disturb the hush. The light outside was paler now, the fog curling low along the open field beyond. Yet the sense of being followed lingered, gentle, subtle, like a hand brushing the back of my neck. Even as I stepped back into the open, the shadows remained in memory, not behind me, not in front, but folded into the corners of my vision, always there. I walked on. The soft rustling of unseen branches followed me, and though nothing called my name, I felt it in the hush between the pines. The grove faded behind me, a secret that would not speak. But I knew it waited patient in the quiet, always waiting. The prairie stretched wide, pale under the soft wash of evening light. Tall grass bent under a gentle wind, whispering across the earth. The smell of damp soil mixed with a faint, dry scent of straw. I walked slowly, each step pressed into the earth, rustling the grass around me. The fog hung low, curling around my ankles, hiding the horizon. Then I saw them, small pinpricks of light, pale and steady, blinking from the grass. Eyes, watching. I froze. The wind shifted, and the rustling grew louder, surrounding me. Shapes crouched between the stalks, stretched, twisted, almost human, almost not. My heart slowed, reluctant, cautious. The air felt heavy, thick with quiet, and a faint hum seemed to pulse through it. I could smell the grass pressing against itself, damp and alive, and something metallic, faint but sharp. I tried to move. My boots sank into the soft soil, leaving prints the fog quickly claimed. The eyes followed, blinking in rhythm, patient, deliberate. The shapes shifted, slow, bending along the stalks. I caught glimpses, a curve, a shimmer, a shadow that paused and disappeared. The grass trembled around them, as if whispering secrets I could not understand. I blinked, and the eyes vanished. Gone. The prairie seemed to hold its breath. Only the rustle of grass remained, small tremors where the shapes had crouched. A chill ran along my neck, soft but insistent, tickling under my collar. I moved again, careful, slow. The fog curled around my legs, pressing lightly against my skin. Every step felt observed, every breath measured. Then, from the edge of my vision, a flash of movement. Eyes, larger now, glinting between the stalks, reflecting the faint light. I did not turn, afraid that focus might make them real. The wind shifted, brushing the prairie in a soft sigh. The tall grass swayed, hiding secrets just out of reach. The air smelled damp and sharp, like the world was breathing against me. I thought I heard them move closer, though no step touched the earth. Soft, deliberate pressure, like a thought brushing my shoulder. The rustling intensified, but the source remained hidden, patient. A blink, and the eyes were gone again. Only the grass trembled where they had been, and a memory of being watched lingered. I wanted to call out, but my voice was small, swallowed by the fog and the tremble of the prairie. Silence returned, thicker, heavier, almost solid. I walked slowly, tracing the path I had taken, trying to convince myself the eyes had been a trick of the light. The grass pressed softly against my hands as I brushed past, cold and wet. The faint hum lingered, like a pulse beneath the earth. The prairie stretched on. Nothing moved in front of me, yet I could feel them just beyond sight. Shapes crouched, stretched, waiting, patient. The fog thinned slightly, revealing the pale horizon. The eyes did not return. Only the tremble of the grass, the whisper of wind, the quiet weight of observation. I breathed in slowly, tasting damp earth and faint iron. The prairie seemed empty, yet heavy, aware. I kept walking, careful not to disturb the hush. Even as I left that part of the field behind, I could feel the eyes lingering, not behind me, not in front, but folded into the corners of my vision, watching, patient, waiting. The wind carried a soft sigh across the prairie. I pressed my hands on my chest, feeling the slow, steady beat of my own pulse. And though the eyes had vanished, the prairie remembered. The grass trembled faintly in the evening light, and I walked on alone, with the sense that something waited, always just beyond sight. The cabin appeared like a shadow folded into the edge of the forest. It was gray and rotting, windows fractured, staring like empty eyes. The fog curled around its corners, soft and damp, hiding the path that led here. I stepped closer. The air smelled faintly of smoke and rot, a scent that pressed against my nose and throat. The wind stirred the fallen leaves, brushing cold against my ankles. The door was cracked open. I hesitated. The floor inside was thick with dust, each step sending motes dancing in the pale light. I moved slowly. The air was heavy, sticky with a faint sweetness, like something burned long ago. The walls pressed close, their shadows curling into corners I could not reach. Scratch marks crawled across the wood, thin and deliberate. They twisted in strange patterns, almost letters, almost shapes that hinted at thought. I ran my fingers lightly along them, and the roughness pricked my skin, cold and splintered. The silence was thick, almost liquid, filling the space between my breaths. A hum pressed against the walls, low, persistent, like the building itself was exhaling. The dust shifted underfoot, soft and deliberate, though no one else moved. A door to a small room at the back caught my attention. It was closed, plain, unremarkable, yet I felt it watch me. Behind it, soft breathing tickled my ears, shallow, almost hesitant. I wanted to open it. My hand hovered above the handle, skin prickling. But a pause held me. suspended in the hush of the cabin. The floor creaked under my weight, a gentle warning. The pale light from the windows slanted across the room, illuminating shapes in the dust. I could see patterns where the motes clustered, drifting like tiny specters. I moved deeper. The smell of smoke intensified, tangling with the faint dampness of the cabin. My fingertips brushed against broken furniture, smooth and splintered, cold under touch. The scratch marks seemed alive, shifting slightly when I wasn't looking. A line of them arched across the wall, curving like the tail of a question that would not be answered. I traced them with my eyes, then looked away, heart slowing in hesitant fascination. The soft breathing continued behind the door, slow, regular, almost intimate. I could feel it through the wood, a quiet presence pressing against my awareness. I dare not open it. The shadows clung close, twisting at the corners, reaching toward the pale light. A cold draft brushed along my neck, soft as a fingertip, and vanished. The cabin exhaled around me. Each step I took seemed to ripple through the dust and silence. The walls held the hum, low and constant, like a heartbeat pressed into timber. I stood in the center of the room, alone but not alone. The scratches curled in my vision. The pale light trembled across the floor, and the soft breathing lingered, patient, deliberate, just beyond reach. I turned to leave. The door to the small room remained closed, silent now, yet present. The floor groaned faintly under my retreating steps, the air thick and humid around me. Outside, the fog had shifted, curling against the cabin walls. The smell of smoke lingered, a whisper in the wind. The prairie beyond stretched pale and empty, but I felt the memory of the cabin follow me. The windows stared as I stepped away, fractured eyes watching. The scratches etched themselves into my mind, sharp and delicate. The soft breathing did not follow, yet I carried it with me, pressed behind my ribs. I walked on slowly, careful, measured. The hum of the cabin lingered in the still air around me, and though the door remained closed, I knew it waited patient in its quiet. The prairie stretched endlessly, pale under a fading evening light. I sat in my truck, engine humming softly, the fog curling low around the tires. The air smelled faintly of dust and damp earth, heavy, pressing close. The radio flickered. Static hissed in a rhythm that mimicked the breath, slow and uneven. I leaned closer, drawn in by the strange cadence, the whispering hiss that almost spoke. I tried to start driving. The engine groaned softly, reluctant, and the truck rolled forward. But the prairie did not end. It stretched in every direction, pale and endless. Shapes appeared at the horizon, thin, twisting figures that bent unnaturally, moving against the fading light. Each blink made them vanish, leaving the air empty, trembling with expectation. I gripped the wheel. The static rose slightly, rhythmic, like the pulse of the prairie itself. It pressed against my chest, soft, persistent. The fog thickened, curling around the tires, around my hands, pressing into the glass. The smell of damp soil deepened, mixed with faint burnt ozone, sharp and unfamiliar. I could feel the heat of the engine, and yet a chill crept through the cab. The shapes shifted. They moved with impossible fluidity, stretching and bending beyond the horizon. I caught glimpses of pale faces, or perhaps the absence of them, before they disappeared. The static hissed again. It matched my heartbeat now, soft and deliberate. I could almost count its rhythm, almost follow it, almost understand it. I drove slowly, hesitant. Each inch forward felt like slipping deeper into something vast, patient, waiting. The horizon held secrets I could not name, yet the eyes of it pressed close. The figures returned, twining in the distance, long limbs bending, stretching, twisting toward nothing and everywhere. The prairie trembled faintly beneath the fading light. I wanted to look away. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The truck felt heavier, sluggish, as though the earth itself resisted my movement. The radio hissed louder, rhythmic, pressing a soft vibration into the cab. The fog wrapped the windshield, curling like smoke around my fingers. Every blink, every breath, the figures shifted, patient, deliberate. I tried to drive faster. The prairie offered no path, no end, only the endless stretch of grass and fading light. The horizon bent unnaturally, holding shapes that could not exist. The static fell into a hollow rhythm, like slow breathing. I pressed my face against the cool glass, eyes straining, heart quiet and trembling. The prairie held me in its hush, vast and unyielding. The shapes remained, twisting, bending, impossibly patient, following in the distance. One blink, and they were gone. Another, and they returned. I stopped, engine rumbling softly beneath me. The air smelled damp and faintly metallic, heavy with quiet. The fog pressed close, and the prairie seemed to hum beneath my tires. I exhaled slowly. The static quieted, but the rhythm lingered in my chest, slow, deliberate. The shapes at the horizon waited, patient, unblinking, bending towards something I could not see. I sat alone. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions. The radio whispered a soft, hollow breath, and the figures lingered at the edge of my vision, waiting, patient, just beyond the horizon. The prairie stretched wide beneath the setting sun. Pale streaks of light brushed across the grass, long and thin, curling at the edges. The air smelled faintly of dry earth, warm and brittle from the day's heat. Shadows stretched, elongating over the soft ground. Each blade of grass seemed to hold a whisper, bending in a rhythm the wind did not make. I walked slowly, careful, feeling the soft crunch beneath my boots. Then I noticed movement. Something shifted far in the distance, against the pale streaks of light. Too fast, too fluid to be human. I stopped. The hairs along my arms lifted, small pricks along my skin. A hush fell over the prairie, pressing close to my chest. The shape moved again, sinuous, deliberate, stretching across the horizon like a ripple in the air. I could not tell its size, its form, only the movement, impossible and patient. The soft from the prairie wrapped around me, a low vibration through my chest. I breathed in slowly. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain yet to fall, mingled with the dry warmth of the grass. I took another step, and the presence mirrored me, not close, not tangible, but reflected in the subtle tilt of shadow, the ripple of wind. The sun dipped lower, casting longer streaks, painting the prairie in pale gold. The shape in the distance paused, still, then bent and flowed as I moved. I felt the slow press of eyes against the back of my neck, patient, careful. The soft rustle of grass surrounded me, delicate and deliberate. The air tasted of dust and warmth, pressed close to my tongue with every breath. I could feel the faint vibration of the earth beneath my boots, almost like a heartbeat. Another movement, quick, fluid, a blur against the pale light. I blinked, and it was gone. I exhaled slowly, letting my chest relax. The prairie returned to hush, though the sense of being mirrored lingered, subtle, insistent. The wind whispered to the blades of grass, brushing lightly against my skin. I moved forward again. The horizon stretched endlessly, soft and pale. Yet the presence followed, bending with my steps. I felt a shiver run along my spine, soft and deliberate, like the prairie itself reached for me. The last streaks of sunlight lingered, brushing the tips of the grass with pale warmth. Shadows shifted under their own will, folding and curling where the light could not reach. The shape moved again in the distance, slow, deliberate, impossible. I stopped once more, chest tight. The prairie held its breath with me, the wind stilling, the hum soft but constant. I could feel the movement of the presence, patient, just beyond sight. I stepped lightly, careful not to break the hush. Each footfall pressed into soft earth. Each step mirrored in some unseen rhythm. The air carried the faint scent of sun-warmed soil, the dry hum of the fading day. The horizon remained pale and empty, yet alive. Shadows stretched, mirrored, twisting with the subtle pulse of the prairie. I knew it followed, patient, deliberate, always just beyond sight. I exhaled again. The sun sank lower, bleeding into the earth, leaving streaks of pale light. And though nothing approached, I felt the presence linger, a soft echo along my spine, waiting, always waiting. The prairie stretched endless beneath the dimming light. My boots pressed into the soft earth. But the sound, it wasn't mine. Every step I took was muted, swallowed by the fog and whispering grass. Behind me, heavier steps echoed in the hush. slower, deliberate, pressing the earth with weight I could not see. I dare not look back. The path curved softly, pale under the fading light. The wind stirred the grass, brushing my legs with a damp touch. Each rustle could hide it. Every shadow could be it. I ran, slowly at first, then faster, though my steps made no sound. The prairie rippled in my peripheral vision, bending and folding as though alive. The heavier footsteps followed, not in rhythm with mine, but constant, patient, pressing close. A low hum seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath my feet. I swallowed, tasting the faint tang of dry soil and dust on my tongue. The air pressing around me, cool and damp, carrying a faint metallic scent. The horizon stretched empty, yet the prairie felt alive with hidden presence. Shadows lengthened, stretching across the path in ways that seemed impossible. Every blade of grass seemed to bend toward the unseen watcher. The fog shifted, curling in patterns I could not track. I dare not breathe too loudly. Each exhale seemed to stir the silence into ripples that traveled behind me. The footsteps never faltered, slow, deliberate, patient. The path twisted beneath pale light, leading me farther into emptiness. Shapes appeared fleetingly in the corner of my vision, elongated, bending with the wind. I blinked, and they vanished, leaving the prairie trembling softly in their absence. My hands pressed my chest, feeling the pulse of fear and the rhythm of unseen footsteps. The grass whispered against itself, brushing along my legs and arms as I ran. The air tasted faintly of ozone, as though charged by some unseen energy. I dared not turn, though the urge gnawed at me. Every nerve hummed with anticipation, every shadow a potential threat. The prairie seemed to ripple, fold, and bend just beyond my sight. The footsteps shifted slightly, closer, softer, then heavier again. I could feel their weight in the ground, in the air, in the subtle vibration underfoot. Each echo was deliberate, a patient reminder that I was not alone. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles, wrapping soft and damp around my boots. The horizon blurred, pale streaks folding into one another. I ran slower, careful now, afraid to disturb the hush. The path narrowed. Grass brushed my arms, damp and cold. Every rustle could be it. The footsteps faded slightly, then returned, heavier, deliberate, pressing close. A shiver ran along my spine, soft, insistent, crawling beneath my skin. The prairie seemed to hold its breath, waiting, patient. I slowed, hesitant, scanning the empty horizon. Nothing moved ahead, yet I felt it everywhere, behind, beside, folding the space around me. The fog shifted, revealing nothing, but the sense of being followed remained. I exhaled slowly, tasting dust and damp earth. The path stretched endlessly, pale and trembling beneath fading light. The footsteps behind me were steady, unyielding, patient. I pressed forward. Each step was careful, deliberate, soft against the muted ground. The prairie rippled with unseen presence, alive with quiet attention. Even as the horizon remained empty, I knew I was not alone. Every rustle, every shadow, every trembling blade of grass held it. The footsteps echoed in my chest, patient, deliberate, waiting. And though I ran, though I breathed, though the path stretched endlessly before me, I could feel the presence fold around me, soft, patient, always there, always following, with footsteps that echoed none. The prairie lay quiet beneath a pale, waning light. A thin veil of mist rose from the ground, curling around my legs. The air smelled damp, earthy, faintly sweet with something I could not name. I stepped forward slowly. Each footfall pressed into soft soil, muffled, almost swallowed by the fog. The grass whispered against my ankles, wet and cold. Silhouettes moved within the mist. They shifted just out of reach, bending, crouching, folding with impossible angles. I felt the hair along my arms rise, a small, steady tremble of unease. One figure paused. It crouched unnaturally, shoulders folded over, head tilted, studying me. Its presence pressed against the air, patient, deliberate. The fog curled higher, soft and damp around my boots. I could feel it brushing against my fingertips as I moved. The prairie seemed to hold its breath with me. Curiosity fought instinctive terror. I wanted to see it closer, to understand the form in the haze. And yet, every fiber of my being warned me to step back. The figure remained still. Shadows clung to its edges, folding and curling with the pale light. The mist carried the faint hum of movement, soft and deliberate. I inhaled slowly. The air tasted of wet earth and faint iron, pressing against my tongue. The rustling of grass seemed louder now, delicate, patient, almost intentional. Another figure flickered at the edge of my vision, thin, elongated, bending with the fog. I blinked, and it was gone. The crouched figure tilted its head further. It seemed to measure me, quiet and deliberate. The prairie felt alive with unseen attention, the mist vibrating softly underfoot. I moved cautiously. The fog shifted with me, curling around my legs, brushing cold along my skin. Each step carried a soft, muffled press into the earth, the prairie holding the motion close. A faint hum pressed through the air, almost like breathing. I could feel it in my chest, subtle and slow, pressing rhythm into my own heartbeat. The silhouettes lingered, patient, waiting just beyond reach. The mist thickened, wrapping the prairie in a pale, trembling veil. Shapes shifted silently within it, bending and crouching, folding impossibly. I could feel the tension pressing along my spine, a quiet pulse through the fog. The crouched figure remained, unwavering, its head tilted, eyes, or the memory of eyes, tracing my movements. Curiosity and fear wrestled inside me, small and sharp, pressing at my chest. I stepped backward slowly. The mist followed, curling softly, brushing ankles and shins with damp insistence. The prairie remained hushed, alive in the stillness, patient, deliberate. The shadows twisted faintly, folding under the pale light. I sensed them watching, always watching, just beyond sight. The hum softened, blending into the quiet of the prairie, leaving only subtle awareness. I exhaled, tasting wet earth and something faintly metallic on my tongue. The crouched figure tilted its head once more, then shifted, folding into the veil. The silhouettes dissolved into mist, leaving tremors in the grass where they had crouched. The prairie seemed empty now, yet I felt the presence linger, subtle and deliberate. Every rustle, every curl of fog carried its memory, pressing against my awareness. I stepped forward cautiously, careful not to disturb the hush. The mist fell soft around my legs, curling in delicate spirals. The silhouettes were gone, but the sense of being watched remained, patient, unseen. Curiosity and fear intertwined, pressing lightly, insistent, folding into the quiet of the prairie. I walked on slowly. The fog pressed close, soft and deliberate, brushing against skin and clothing. And though the figures had vanished, I knew they lingered, just beyond reach, always patient, always watching, beneath the rustling veil. The prairie lay quiet beneath a darkening sky. The grass swayed softly, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and lingering sun. Each step I took pressed into the soil, soft, muted, absorbed by the hush. Then it began, a low, steady hum, subtle at first, pressing beneath my feet. It was not musical, not pleasant. It vibrated through the air, alive, patient. I stopped. The hum rose slightly, curling around my ankles, pressing softly against my chest. It felt aware, moving with me, pressing close when I lingered, fading when I ran. The prairie seemed to hold its breath. The wind stilled, brushing lightly through grass, almost hesitant. The air smelled damp and metallic, thick with tension, pressing against my tongue. I walked slowly, each step deliberate. The hum rose with each pause, curling into the soles of my boots. Shadows stretched long and thin, bending with the light, folding in impossible ways. I tried to run. The hum fell almost shy, but quickened as soon as I slowed. It followed, patient, deliberate, moving in rhythm with the subtle pulse beneath the ground. The grass whispered against my legs, brushing damp and cold along my skin. Shapes shifted at the edges of my vision, bending, folding, crouching, then gone. The prairie seemed alive, holding its hush and its hum in equal measure. I pressed my hands to my chest. The hum vibrated through me, subtle, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. The air tasted faintly of iron and wet earth, pressing close to my nose and lips. I walked, careful, slow, feeling the vibration beneath my boots. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, pale light folding into shadows. Each pause brought the hum closer, curling along my legs, pressing in soft, insistent waves. The horizon remained empty, yet alive. The hum pulsed with subtle patience, moving with my steps, wrapping the air, the earth, the quiet prairie itself around me. I could feel it in my chest, faint, deliberate. Each breath I took pressed against the hum, a soft rhythm syncing with mine. The wind stirred faintly, brushing the blades of grass, whispering secrets I could not name. I stopped completely. The hum pressed close, almost intimate, curling along my feet and ankles. Shadows folded and twisted in the dim light, long, impossible, patient. A shiver ran along my spine, soft, insistent. The prairie seemed to ripple beneath my gaze, alive with quiet intention. The hum vibrated softly, following each slight movement, deliberate, aware. I took a cautious step forward. The vibration beneath my boots shifted, subtle, responsive. Every blade of grass seemed to tremble in sympathy, brushing cold against my fingers. The prairie stretched endlessly, still, alive with quiet expectation. The hum lingered, patient, following, moving with me, a soft pulse beneath my feet that pressed against my chest, folding itself into the hush of the dark prairie. I exhaled slowly, tasting damp earth and faint iron. The hum receded slightly as I moved, but remained patient, present, alive in a hush, underfoot, pressing against my awareness. I walked on, each step soft, deliberate, careful, the prairie holding its hush, its hum, its subtle, deliberate awareness. And though I could not see it, though the horizon remained empty, I knew the prairie remembered my presence. The hum followed, soft, insistent, patient, alive beneath my feet, beneath the hush, always waiting, always moving with me. The prairie lay quiet beneath a pale, fading light. The grass swayed softly in a wind I could barely feel. The air smelled faintly of dust and damp earth, heavy and patient. I glimpsed it first at the edge of my vision, a silhouette, thin and elongated, moving backwards. Each step against the grain of the prairie, impossible, deliberate. I blinked. It froze, perfectly still, as if it did not exist between my blinks. The hairs on my arms lifted. I swallowed slowly, tasting faint iron in the air. The prairie seemed to bend with its presence, subtle, deliberate. I moved forward. It mirrored me. When I froze, it froze. When I ran, it followed, relentless. The fog curled low along the ground, damp against my ankles. The grass whispered against my legs, brushing soft and cold. The horizon stretched pale, endless, trembling with quiet anticipation. I dared not look directly. Its movements defied all logic, bending and folding with the prairie itself. The shadow pressed close, patient, deliberate, folding the air with its motion. I stepped carefully, each footfall pressed into soft earth, faint, absorbed by the hush. The prairie seemed to hum beneath me, low and constant, vibrating to the soles of my boots. The figure moved again, backwards, deliberate, each step sending a shiver along my spine. I froze. It froze. The world held its breath with me. The wind stirred, brushing against my cheeks, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and faint smoke. The horizon shifted subtly, shadows curling in ways that made no sense. The silhouette remained, patient, unwavering, folding the space around it. I ran, soft and careful. The prairie stretched endlessly, pale light folding into the grass. The figure followed, relentless, a mirror to my motion, pressing close in its silent pursuit. I slowed, heart steadying, air tasting of dry grass and faint iron. It slowed too, matching my rhythm with impossible precision. Every step felt measured, deliberate, a quiet tension pressing against the chest. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, soft and damp. The prairie hummed beneath me, subtle, alive. The figure pressed forward, backwards, always there, always folding space with patient intent. I dared not turn. Every glance in the periphery showed impossible angles, shifting shadows, impossible movement. The prairie itself seemed alive, bending to the will of the figure that walked backwards. I exhaled slowly. The air pressed close, damp and faintly metallic, brushing against my lips. The grass whispered against my hands as I passed, soft and deliberate. I stepped lightly, careful. The horizon stretched pale, the prairie trembling softly in the fading light. The silhouette moved, backwards, impossible, patient, relentless in its quiet pursuit. I stopped. The figure stopped. The prairie held its hush, folding the space between us with subtle, deliberate attention. I stepped forward again. It mirrored me, step for step, bending the horizon with each backward motion. The wind stirred faintly, brushing damp and cold across my cheeks. The sun sank lower, staining the prairie in pale streaks. The silhouette folded the shadows into its motion, pressing close without sound. I felt its presence everywhere, patient, deliberate, folding the prairie itself around me. I exhaled slowly. The figure froze again, then bent its motion, impossible, patient. I stepped lightly, soft, careful, the prairie trembling beneath each gentle footfall. And though I could not fully see it, though the horizon remained pale and empty, I knew it was there, walking backwards, relentless, patient, deliberate, folding the world, step by impossible step, always with me, always waiting just beyond sight. The prairie lay quiet beneath the dark sky. The grass pressed softly against my legs, damp from evening dew. The air smelled of cold earth, faintly metallic, heavy with the hush of night. I heard it first, breathing where there was none, close, shallow, measured, curling through the air like fog. I froze. The prairie held its breath with me. Shadows shifted, folding in impossible angles, as if the air itself carried a presence. Each exhale from me felt amplified. The rhythm of my own heartbeat pressed against my chest, loud and deliberate. The wind stilled, leaving only the faint, measured breaths echoing in the hush. The fog curled low, brushing damp along my ankles. The prairie seemed to tremble, softly beneath the weight of silence. Every blade of grass whispered against itself, bending toward some unseen watcher. The breathing grew heavier, closer, deliberate. It pressed against the hush, a patient, insistent rhythm beneath my ribs. I could feel it in my chest, faint vibration, almost alive. I stepped lightly. Each footfall pressed soft into wet earth, barely moving the mist. The shadows folded and stretched, bending the prairie around my movement. I dare not look. The measured breaths pressed closer, soft and deliberate, brushing against my awareness. The prairie held its hush, patient, alive, as if waiting for me to falter. A shiver ran along my spine. The fog brushed my legs again, damp and cold. The air pressed against my nose, tasting faintly of wet soil and iron. I exhaled slowly. The breaths followed, patient, deliberate, moving with the hush of the prairie. Each shadow seemed to ripple slightly, curling around me, folding the darkness softly. I moved forward. The air grew heavy, thick, carrying the faint vibration of measured breaths. The prairie stretched endlessly, pale and trembling beneath the faint moonlight. The shadows shifted again. They bent impossibly, folding and curling around the blades of grass. The breathing pressed closer, still patient, still deliberate, pressing against the chest. I stopped. The hush thickened, wrapping the prairie in soft, deliberate quiet. Every nerve held tension, every muscle tuned to the measured, shallow rhythm that pressed close. I stepped carefully. The fog wrapped around my ankles, brushing damp and soft. The prairie held its breath with me, alive with subtle intention. The breaths pressed closer still. Each inhalation a quiet wave that pressed against my chest, folding the silence around me. The horizon stretched pale and empty, yet alive, trembling with attention. I dared not exhale too loudly. The prairie seemed to shift with every breath, every step, every hesitant movement. The hush pressed into my ears, vibrating through the soles of my boots. The shadows bent in subtle arcs, folding around blades of grass and mist. The measured breaths echoed in the hush, a patient presence unseen yet undeniable. I felt it everywhere, pressing against my awareness, soft and deliberate, I moved slowly, careful, each step soft against damp soil. The fog rose slightly, curling around my legs, brushing cold along my skin. The prairie remained patient, alive in its hush, carrying the unseen presence with it. The breaths grew slightly heavier, deliberate, folding into the prairie's quiet rhythm. I exhaled slowly, tasting damp earth and faint iron on my tongue. Each shadow seemed to ripple, responding to the quiet tension in the air. I stepped forward again. The hush deepened, the breaths lingering, patient, pressing close without sound. The prairie stretched endlessly, alive with soft, deliberate awareness. And though I could not see it, though the horizon remained empty, I knew the presence lingered, patient and deliberate, folding the prairie, the fog, the hush around me, breaths in the night, always close, always waiting, soft, insistent, and unseen. The prairie thinned as I approached a massive oak. Its trunk loomed, hollowed and broken, pale light slipping through jagged gaps. The air smelled faintly of wet bark and earth, damp and heavy. I stepped closer. Something inside moved, slow, dragging along the curved wood. The sound was soft, subtle, a whisper against the hush of the prairie. The wind stirred, brushing damp grass against my ankles. Each rustle pressed soft against my skin, almost like breath. The oak towered above, shadow folding into its hollow. Curiosity drew me closer, though a small voice inside whispered to stop. I reached out, fingertips brushing rough bark, cold and uneven beneath my touch. The movement inside paused, patient, deliberate. I leaned forward, careful, peering into the darkness. The hollow was empty. No form, no shape, only a void that seemed alive. I felt eyes, weightless, unseen, pressing from within the black. The prairie held its hush, trembling with subtle attention. The air was thick, damp, tasting faintly metallic on my tongue. The wind curled around the tree, rustling leaves softly, brushing hair against my face. The hollow seemed to pulse with subtle life, patient and deliberate. I exhaled slowly. Each breath carried the scent of wet earth and fading sun. The movement inside the hollow shifted, curling around the edges of perception. I stepped back slightly. The prairie stretched pale and quiet, alive with soft whispers of unseen presence. The tree's shadow bent in impossible ways, folding across the grass. The hollow seemed to watch me. Even though it was empty, I felt a presence fold along the edges, pressing close. My pulse quickened softly, a gentle tremor in the hush. I leaned in again, drawn despite myself. The bark scraped softly under my fingertips, cold and uneven. The hollow remained dark, patient, unblinking, yet I could feel the weight of awareness. The prairie held its breath. The wind stilled, brushing faintly against skin and hair. Every rustle, every subtle vibration, seemed to respond to the hollow's quiet presence. I exhaled again, slow, deliberate. The hollow shifted subtly, dragging along its empty walls. I could feel it pressing close, just beyond reach, patient, deliberate. I stepped back. The oak loomed larger, shadows curling into impossible angles. The prairie trembled softly, alive with subtle attention. The hollow remained, waiting, eyes unseen pressed on me from the dark, patient, calm. The air smelled damp, earthy, carrying a faint metallic tang that pressed against my senses. I circled slowly, careful, soft steps pressing into wet earth. The movement inside shifted again, curling against the black. Each rustle of leaves, each whisper grass, seemed alive with intent. I stopped, still in my breath. The hollow pressed its presence against me, silent, unseen, patient. The prairie held a hush, bending around the oak, around the darkness. I exhaled slowly, tasting earth and cold air. The hollow remained empty, yet alive, watching, waiting, patient. The shadows folded softly, brushing against the edges of perception. I stepped away, careful, hesitant. The oak loomed behind me, hollow and unblinking, a patient watcher in the quiet prairie. The air pressed close, damp and cold, carrying subtle whispers of movement and breath. And though I left its side, I could feel it still. Eyes in the hollow, patient, deliberate, unseen. The prairie remained quiet, trembling softly, holding the hush, The shadows, the watchful presence, always waiting, always watching beneath the massive oak, the hollow tree. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath a pale, fading sky. The grass brushed soft against my legs, damp and cool. The air smelled faintly of wet soil and fading sunlight, heavy with hush. I noticed the footprints first, soft impressions in the earth, pressed lightly yet deliberate. They weren't mine. I stepped closer. The tracks twisted through the tall grass, impossible in their curves. Some were small, delicate, almost human. Others were enormous, pressing deep into the soil. I followed them cautiously. Each step pressed soft against damp earth. The grass whispered faintly around my ankles, brushing cold and wet. The footprints moved with a strange logic. They curved and folded, bending the prairie into impossible shapes. Each trail seemed to shift subtly, circling back in ways that made no sense. I stopped, heart pressing softly against my chest. The tracks circled back toward where I stood. I realized I hadn't moved at all, yet the ground showed I had wandered endlessly. The prairie held its hush, soft and patient. The air pressed lightly against my skin, damp and faintly metallic. Every rustle of grass seemed amplified, every shadow bending toward me. I stepped lightly again, careful, deliberate. The footprints shifted subtly beneath my gaze. They twisted and curved, some impossibly large, some impossibly small. The horizon stretched pale and endless. The tracks led nowhere, folding back on themselves like a puzzle I could not solve. I felt trapped, alone, each breath pressed heavy in the still air. The grass swayed softly, brushing against my fingers and ankles. The earth smelled damp and faintly of iron, heavy with quiet tension. The tracks seemed to pulse subtly beneath my feet, as if alive. I circled slowly, hesitant, careful to follow the impressions. The prairie whispered around me, soft and deliberate. Every step brought a subtle shift in the tracks, bending, curling, impossible. The footprints pressed close, circling, folding the space around me. I froze. The tracks led back to the exact spot where I had first noticed them. A shiver ran along my spine. The wind stilled, carrying the faint, damp smell of grass and earth. The prairie held its hush, patient, alive in its quiet, subtle way. I stepped forward again, careful, hesitant. The impressions twisted beneath my gaze, circling, folding, impossible in their logic. Every blade of grass seemed to press closer, brushing soft and damp against my skin. The horizon remained pale and empty. The footprints pressed back toward me, relentless, patient. Each circle drew me inward, closer to the same spot, trapping me in soft dread. I exhaled slowly. The air tasted faintly metallic, damp with the weight of quiet prairie. The grass whispered against my legs, bending as if aware, alive with subtle intention. I moved lightly, careful, hesitant. The footprints remained, circling, folding, impossible, patient. The prairie held its hush, the tracks tracing impossibly around me, around my fear. I stopped again. The earth beneath my feet seemed to tremble softly, alive with quiet attention. The footprints pressed close, circling, folding the prairie back into itself. The wind stirred faintly, brushing damp and cold across my skin. The horizon stretched pale, endless, unblinking. I realized I could not escape. The footprints led nowhere, always back to me, patient, deliberate, folding the prairie, folding the silence, trapping me in soft, unrelenting dread. I exhaled slowly, tasting damp earth and cold air. The tracks circled again. The prairie whispered softly around me. I was alone, and the footprints, impossible and patient, led nowhere. The prairie stretched under a heavy, dark sky. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and ozone. Damp grass brushed against my ankles, soft and cold. A distant flash of lightning split the horizon. Figures stood there, faint and unmoving, tall, thin silhouettes that seemed almost human, yet not. I blinked. The figures shifted subtly. Each flash brought a change I couldn't name. The wind pressed against my face, carrying faint smells of rain and wet soil. The grass whispered against my legs, as if trembling under the watch of unseen eyes. The horizon remained pale, trembling with quiet tension. I moved forward, careful, soft steps pressing into damp earth. Another flash lit the prairie. The figures had shifted again, slightly taller, slightly bent, impossible angles in their limbs. I stopped. The hush of the prairie pressed close, damp and heavy. Each breath of mine echoed faintly in the stillness. The figures remained patient, deliberate, folded into the pale light of lightning. I blinked. The horizon was empty, but the feeling lingered. Eyes unseen pressed against me. The air vibrated faintly, carrying subtle hums of anticipation. The grass swayed, brushing soft against my hands as I reached out, cautious. Another flash. The shapes returned, silhouettes folding in subtle, impossible ways. They weren't quite human. I felt the weight of their presence fold against the prairie itself. I exhaled slowly, tasting faint metallic tang in the damp air. The horizon trembled softly in the distance. Every rustle of grass seemed amplified, each shadow bending toward me. I moved again, hesitant, careful. Soft footsteps pressed into wet earth, absorbed by the hush. The prairie held its breath, patient, alive with quiet attention. The figures flickered in the horizon with each flash, subtle shifts in posture, shape, presence. Impossible angles in limbs, faint distortion in height. Each glimpse pressed a quiet chill into my chest. I stopped. The wind stilled, damp and soft against my cheeks. The prairie whispered, alive with a subtle tension of unseen watchers. I exhaled slowly. The figures flickered once more. Blink. Gone. The horizon empty. But I could still feel them. Patient, deliberate, pressing close in the hush. Shadows folded along the prairie, stretching, curling, faintly impossible. The air tasted damp, earthy, carrying faint ozone from distant lightning. The grass brushed against my legs again, soft and alive. The horizon remained pale, trembling faintly under the weight of what I couldn't see. I stepped forward again. Each flash returned to silhouettes, subtle, unnatural, patient in their quiet presence. I blinked. Gone again. Yet the prairie still pressed their weight into me. The hush thickened, folding around my ears, my chest, my awareness. Each breath seemed louder, heavier, pressed by the absence of movement. The lightning faded, leaving pale twilight and quiet tension. I exhaled slowly. The figures no longer appeared, but the weight remained. Eyes unseen pressed against me from the horizon. Shadows bent softly, folding the prairie around the unseen watchers. I moved slowly, careful, hesitant. The grass whispered against my hands, brushing soft, cold, damp. The prairie held its hush, alive, patient, deliberate. I stopped. The horizon remained empty, yet I knew I was watched. The air pressed close, damp and faintly metallic, carrying subtle hums of presence. The figures flickered once more in memory, imprinting weight into the soft, trembling prairie. I exhaled. The hush remained. The prairie remained patient. And I was alone, yet not alone, watched by shapes that might return with the next flicker of light. The prairie stretched beneath a silvered moon. Its pale light pressed soft against the tall grass, casting long, trembling shadows. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and cold night, heavy with stillness. Beneath the moonlight, the grass shifted. Subtle, almost imperceptible movements, like whispers against the earth. Something scuttled silently, brushing against stalks, unseen but present. Each rustle pressed against my ears, soft and deliberate. My heart thudded gently, irregular, echoing the hush of the prairie. I felt eyes, countless, hidden, folding the darkness around me. I stepped lightly, careful, soft feet pressing into dew-damp soil. The rustling moved with me, curling along the grass, patient, deliberate. The prairie seemed alive, trembling beneath the weight of unseen watchers. I exhaled slowly. The cool air tasted faintly metallic and earthy. Every shadow pressed lightly, subtle, and alive against my skin. I paused. The grass whispered, brushing ankles and fingertips. Something shifted beneath, a presence pressing soft, deliberate, patient. Moonlight bent across the prairie, silvering each stalk. Each flicker of shadow hinted at shapes just beyond perception. Eyes pressed in the darkness, unseen, patient, deliberate. I moved again, careful, deliberate. The scuttling followed, subtle, curling around each step. The hush pressed close, folding the prairie, alive and aware. A soft wind stirred, brushing hair against my cheeks. The air carried damp earth and faint ozone from distant storms. The rustling grew faintly louder, responsive to my movement, patient, deliberate. I stopped once more, breath slow, deliberate. The prairie held its hush. The grass bent and shifted beneath moonlight, pressing soft against my ankles. Something paused nearby. The silence pressed heavy, thick with unspoken presence. I could feel it folding into the shadows. A watcher just beyond perception. I stepped forward again, slow, careful. Each rustle pressed against my awareness, brushing skin, bending grass. The prairie folded itself around the unseen eyes, patient, deliberate. Moonlight traced silver paths across the prairie. Shadows twisted softly, bending along the unseen forms. Each rustle, each whisper of movement pressed close to my ears, gentle and alive. I exhaled slowly. The prairie trembled faintly, alive with quiet attention. The scuttling beneath moonlight was patient, deliberate, impossibly still. I moved lightly, careful, feeling the soft earth beneath each foot. The rustling followed, curling softly around each step. Eyes pressed from the darkness, hidden but aware, patient and deliberate. The prairie was alive, trembling under the silvered light. Each stalk of grass pressed soft against my hands, my legs, my awareness. The moon hovered pale and distant, casting long shadows across the restless earth. I paused. The scuttling pressed close, patient, deliberate. The hush of the prairie held me in soft tension, alive with unseen watchers. I exhaled once more, slow, deliberate. The grass shifted beneath moonlight, brushing soft and cool. The prairie remained alive, trembled, and pressed against me with hidden eyes. I stepped lightly, careful, hesitant. The rustling followed, subtle, deliberate, curling around each movement. The moonlight stretched silver paths across the prairie, folding the shadows and the unseen watchers. I stopped. The hush pressed close. The prairie held its breath. I was alone, and yet not alone. The grass shifted, patient, deliberate, beneath the moon, beneath hidden eyes, beneath quiet, unblinking presence. The prairie stretched pale beneath a waning sun. The grass brushed softly against my legs, damp with evening dew. The air smelled faintly of earth and warmth, heavy with quiet tension. I had been following a trail, soft depressions in the earth, but it vanished suddenly. The ground opened into open prairie, unbroken, endless. I stopped. The horizon shimmered faintly, like heat rising from distant soil. Shadows pressed soft across the pale grass, bending subtly in the fading light. I squinted, trying to see through the wavering heat. Figures appeared, pale, distant, walking slowly. Their movements were deliberate, careful, impossibly calm. I blinked. The figures vanished. The horizon remained empty, yet the sense of being watched pressed against me. The grass whispered around my ankles, soft and deliberate. The prairie seemed to fold beneath the fading light, alive with subtle tension. Every step I took pressed faintly into soft, unyielding earth. I exhaled slowly. The air tasted faintly metallic, damp with evening dew. Shadows stretched long, folding subtly, bending the prairie around me. I moved forward, careful, hesitant. The sense of presence pressed close, patient, deliberate. Each step seemed to echo softly in the hush, though no sound returned. The horizon shimmered again. Figures appeared briefly, folding into the heat, walking away slowly. I blinked. Gone. The prairie held its hush, heavy and patient. The grass bent softly under my fingers, brushing cold and damp. Every rustle felt deliberate, aware, almost sentient. I exhaled. The horizon remained pale, endless, impossibly distant. The sense of watching persisted, pressing lightly across the prairie. I stepped forward again. The vanished trail left no trace, no guidance, no path. Only the subtle tremble of grass beneath my feet and the hush of unseen presence. The figures flickered faintly at the horizon, bending in impossible ways. Each appearance brief, shifting with the shimmer of heat. I blinked. Gone. I paused. The wind pressed soft against my face, damp with earth and fading warmth. The prairie whispered faintly, brushing soft against my ankles, alive in its hush. Every direction I looked, the prairie stretched pale and unbroken. No trail, no footprints, nothing but soft, trembling grass. Yet I knew I was not alone. I exhaled slowly. The horizon shimmered faintly once more. Figures, impossible, distant, walking deliberately, vanishing with each blink. The grass bent beneath soft footsteps, brushing cool and damp against my fingers. The prairie held its hush, patient, deliberate, aware of my presence. The vanished trail left me folded within endless, quiet tension. I moved cautiously, slow, deliberate, each step pressing to the soft earth, the hush pressing close. The horizon remained pale, impossibly distant, yet alive with memory. The figures flickered briefly once more. I blinked. Gone again. The sense of watching lingered, folding into every rustle, every shadow. I exhaled once more, slow, deliberate. The prairie pressed close, the grass soft, damp, brushing against my legs. The horizon stretched pale, unbroken, shimmering faintly. I stopped. The vanished path was gone. The figures were gone, but the prairie held its hush. Patient, deliberate, and I was alone, yet not alone. The prairie lay quiet beneath a dimming sky. The wind had died, leaving only a hush that pressed soft against my ears. The air smelled faintly of earth and fading warmth, damp and heavy. I walked slowly, careful, each footfall pressing soft into dew-damp grass. The prairie seemed to hold its breath around me, patient and aware. Every shadow stretched long, folding subtly into the fading light. Then it came, a chill, sudden and cold, grazed the back of my neck. No wind moved. The air remained still. I spun. Nothing. Only grass swaying faintly in the hush. Yet the hair on my arm stood straight, prickling with awareness. A soft rustle moved around me, side to side, deliberate, patient, circling. I felt its presence more than heard it, pressing lightly against my senses. I exhaled slowly. The air tasted faintly metallic, carrying the hush of the prairie and earth. The rustle continued, gentle, circling, patient, deliberate. I stepped forward cautiously, careful. The grass bent softly beneath my feet, brushing cold and damp against my ankles. The circling presence followed, folding into the hush around me. The prairie seemed alive. Every shadow pressed subtly, every stalk trembled faintly. The soft rustling brushed against my senses, impossible to locate, patient, deliberate. I stopped. The chill lingered at the nape of my neck, brushing softly, teasing awareness. The hush pressed close. I exhaled slowly, listening. The circling rustle moved with me, subtle, aware, patient. The prairie trembled faintly beneath invisible footsteps, folding softly in the dim light. The sky deepened into dusk. Pale light pressed across the grass. Shadows lengthened and bent, impossibly soft, shifting with impossible patience. I could feel eyes, countless, hidden, pressing from darkness, folded into the prairie. I moved again, light, careful, deliberate. The rustle followed, circling softly, patient, impossible to pinpoint. Each step pressed into the dew-damp earth, echoing only in my awareness. The chill came again, brushing soft along my shoulders. The air pressed heavy, damp, tasting faintly of earth and fading warmth. The prairie whispered subtly, alive with hidden presence. I paused. The hush pressed close, folding the grass, the shadows, the unseen watchers around me. The circling presence lingered, patient, deliberate, impossible to locate. My breath exhaled slow and steady. The prairie folded softly beneath my feet, each stalk brushing against my legs. The chill lingered faintly, the rustle circling softly, almost teasing awareness. I moved once more, careful, soft. The prairie seemed aware, bending slightly beneath unseen attention. Every step echoed in my own awareness, though the earth remained still beneath me. The rustle pressed closer, circling, patient, deliberate. I could feel it brushing my senses from every side. The hush folded around me, soft and impossible, alive with quiet tension. I stopped again, listening. The prairie held its breath, trembling faintly beneath unseen eyes. The chill lingered at my neck, brushing light and deliberate, patient and aware. I exhaled slowly. The grass swayed softly in the stillness, brushing cool against my hands. The rustling presence moved quietly, circling, patient, deliberate. The sky darkened further, pale light folding into soft, long shadows. The hush pressed closer, bending the prairie beneath the weight of unseen watchers. Every sense felt stretched, alive with quiet, patient awareness. I moved once more, hesitant, careful, each step soft. The circling rustle followed, impossible to locate, impossible to ignore. The chill lingered at the nape of my neck, brushing soft and deliberate. I paused. The prairie folded itself around me, the shadows pressing soft and aware. The rustling continued, patient, deliberate, impossible to name. The hush remained, soft and unyielding. The prairie trembled faintly beneath invisible presence. I was alone and yet not alone. The chill lingered, the rustling circled, and the prairie held its quiet, patient breath. The prairie lay quiet beneath the silver wash of a rising moon. Shadows stretched long across the grass, folding gently into one another. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and cold evening dew. I walked slowly, careful, each footfall pressing soft into the earth. The grass brushed against my ankles, cold and wet, whispering with every movement. The night held itself still, a hush folded tight around the prairie. Then I saw it, a figure crouched low by a fallen log, still as stone. Its presence pressed into me, heavy and quiet, yet impossible to ignore. I froze. My breath slowed, shallow and soft, as if moving might break some fragile spell. The air smelled faintly of smoke and frost, mingling strangely. The figure's head tilted unnaturally, small movements precise and deliberate. For a moment, I thought I understood its intent. Curiosity, malice, something older than myself, folded into that stillness. The grass around me shivered faintly in the hush. A soft rustle of leaves moved without wind, pressing subtly against my senses. Every shadow seemed aware, stretching toward me. I wanted to step forward, to see clearly, to understand. But my legs refused, held fast by quiet dread. The figure's eyes, or what I thought were eyes, glimmered faintly in the pale light. A soft hum pressed low, vibrating through the air, brushing against the tips of my fingers. It was patient, still, waiting. The prairie seemed to fold beneath that presence. Even the fallen log looked different, elongated in shadow, alive with anticipation. Every breath I drew felt too loud, pressing against the silence. Then it moved, not toward me, not away, simply vanished. The space it had occupied was empty, yet I felt it everywhere. The air felt colder, brushing damp and sharp against my skin. The hush deepened, pressing tight around me, folding shadows and grass alike. I could feel the weight of being watched, though nothing remained in sight. I exhaled slowly. The prairie pressed soft and damp beneath my feet. Every stalk of grass trembled faintly, as if sharing some hidden awareness. I stepped forward cautiously, each footfall deliberate, careful. The air smelled faintly metallic, carrying the subtle hum of something unseen. The shadows pressed closer, yet no wind moved. I looked back toward the fallen log. Nothing, only the pale silver wash of moonlight and the long shadows bending faintly. The hush remained, patient and unyielding. Every sense felt stretched. The soft rustle of the grass, the chill press in my spine, the faint hum under the air, all alive with hidden intention. I could feel the gaze, patient, everywhere, impossible to escape. I moved slowly, careful, pressing soft through dew-damp grass. The prairie seemed to ripple faintly beneath unseen eyes. Every shadow bent, subtle, deliberate, folding tight around the hush. I paused, listening. The night held its breath, pressed close, alive with anticipation. The soft hum vibrated through the air, brushing against my awareness, impossible to locate. Then, a memory of the figure flickered in my mind. Crouched, still, head tilted in that impossible angle. The sense of understanding, something dark, patient, ancient, folded with a memory. The prairie remained silent, yet I felt it everywhere, circling, watching, impossible to name. The cold pressed lightly against my neck, brushing soft, deliberate. I exhaled again, slow and measured. Every shadow trembled faintly, every stalk of grass bent with quiet intent. I could feel the hush pressing tight, alive with waiting. I took a step forward, careful, soft. The presence lingered in the space it occupied, unseen but heavier than air. Every sense screamed patience, deliberate, aware beyond understanding. The fallen log remained, still and hollowed in moonlight, yet the weight of unseen eyes pressed from every side. The hush lingered, quiet and unyielding, circling, patient, deliberate. I walked on slowly, each step careful, soft. The prairie pressed close, shadows bending impossibly. The figure was gone, yet its watch remained, folded into the very hush of night. The moonlight washed silver over grass and shadow. The air smelled faintly of earth, dew, and lingering frost. The prairie breathed softly, patient and impossible, keeping its silent watcher hidden but near. I exhaled, slow, careful. The hush pressed close, the shadows stretched, the unseen gaze followed. And I walked, soft-footed, aware, under the cold, patient watch of something that would not move. The prairie was quiet beneath a muted sky. Dusk lingered, stretching long shadows over damp grass. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and cold stone. A fog began to roll in, thick and curling, slipping around my legs. It pressed soft and damp against my skin, a whispered chill that ran along my spine. Each step made the mist stir, a silent ripple through the pale gray folds. I thought I heard something. Soft, delicate, almost a word. My name, carrying the hush of mist, gentle, pleading. I stopped listening. The fog curled tighter around me, brushing cool against my arms. Every rustle seemed alive, moving with a thought I couldn't name. I leaned closer to the whisper. It shifted, slinking away, impossible to follow. The silence that remained felt heavier, pressing into my chest. The grass trembled beneath the weight of unseen movement. The fog moved like slow water, curling, folding, revealing only more shadows. The air smelled damp and faintly metallic, like distant rain on iron. I took a careful step. Soft footfalls pressed into sodden ground, muffled, muted, swallowed by the mist. It moved with me, slipping around ankles, brushing fingers, curling over shoulders. A word again, faint, pleading. I tried to listen, tried to hold it in the space between my breaths. The fog shifted suddenly, scattering into something thinner, then curling thick again. Silence pressed, tight and waiting. The prairie felt impossibly vast and impossibly close at the same time. Every rustle, every soft movement seemed intentional. Something was there, watching, whispering, patient. I could feel in the air, brushing against my skin, curling around my senses. I reached forward, thinking I might touch it. The mist parted, slipping through my fingers like smoke. A faint chill lingered where it had been, brushing soft along my cheek. I breathed slowly. The fog twisted around my legs, cold and damp. Each step made it curl tighter, as if aware of my hesitation. The whisper returned, closer now, but never clear. Impossible to hold, impossible to follow. The prairie stretched endlessly beyond the gray folds. Shadows moved inside the mist, fleeting, delicate, refusing form. Every sense screamed awareness. I stepped carefully, soft. The damp wrapped around my ankles, pressed against my skin, brushing wet and cold. The whisper shifted again, curling upward, brushing against my ears, slipping into the hush. I stopped waiting. The fog pressed closer, patient, deliberate, alive in a way that chilled my chest. Every rustle was a heartbeat, slow, impossible, measured. I moved again, tentative. The prairie opened wide, yet the fog held tight, curling at the edges of my vision. It breathed with me, soft and deliberate, following, coaxing, impossible to see. The whisper lingered in fragments. My name, faint, pleading. I strained to hear, but it dissolved as soon as I focused, leaving only silence and tension. The grass bent under the weight of unseen steps. The mist swirled, curling, folding, curling again. Every shadow inside it seemed alive, reaching just beyond comprehension. I felt the prairie close around me, infinite and empty at once. The hush of the fog pressed into my chest, soft and steady. It whispered only to vanish, leaving breathless quiet behind. I exhaled slowly. The mist rolled in slow waves, brushing cool and damp against my arms. The whisper was gone, or perhaps only hidden, patient, waiting. I moved on cautiously. The fog clung to my legs, brushed my skin, curled over shoulders, shifting with impossible intention. Every step, every soft footfall pressed into wet ground and vanished, as if swallowed. The prairie remained silent, infinite, gray, and waiting. The mist held the memory of the whispers, soft and pleading. I walked carefully, aware, alone, carrying the echo of words that might never be spoken again. The prairie was quiet, heavy with night. A chill clung to my skin, damp with dew. The air smelled of wet earth, faint and metallic like distant rain. Eyes appeared in the grass, pale, unblinking at first. Then they blinked in unison, reflecting the faint starlight. I froze. Every rustle of the grass seemed magnified, deliberate, aware. Each movement I made was mirrored by the subtle shimmer of light in the eyes. I stepped forward. The grass bent under my foot, soft and damp. The eyes followed, shifting through blades, always just beyond reach. I turned my head. The space appeared empty. No movement, no shadow, only the whisper of wind brushing the prairie. I realized then this place held secrets. Secrets it would never reveal. The grass hummed faintly, brushing my legs as if laughing softly at my curiosity. I leaned closer. The pale light in the eyes flickered, as if breathing. I could feel them, attentive, patient, waiting. Each blink felt intentional. A rhythm that pressed into my chest, slow, almost musical, almost alive. I shivered as the night wrapped tight around me. The prairie stretched wide, endless, but the eyes kept pace. Every soft footstep pressed into moist soil muted, swallowed by the hum of stillness. The wind carried a faint scent, smoke, earth, and something I couldn't name. I reached out, almost wanted to touch them. The grass whispered against my fingers, slipping, curling, pulling away. The eyes blinked again, and I realized I would never reach them. I stopped listening. The prairie was alive with stillness, but every sense screamed alert. Shadows moved where shadows should not be, bending around shapes I could not see. I breathed slowly. The dew clung to my skin, cold and wet. The hum of the grass pressed against my chest, soft and unyielding. Every blink of the pale eyes echoed in my mind. Slow, deliberate, a rhythm I could not control. I felt small, watched, a single note in the vast emptiness of the prairie night. I tried to walk forward. The grass shifted, curling around ankles, brushing soft against my skin. The eyes followed, ever patient, ever silent. The horizon stretched pale and empty, yet I felt the weight of unseen gazes pressing against me. Each step left me more aware of the prairie's hidden intent. The eyes blinked once more, synchronized, and then they disappeared. Only the wet grass remained, trembling faintly as if sighing. I stood still, listening. The prairie held its breath, waiting, silent, infinite. I could not move without feeling watched, touched by something that was never there. A soft rustle brushed past my ear. The air smelled of cold earth and distant rain. I exhaled slowly, aware of the space around me, yet knowing it hid more than I could see. I moved cautiously, step by step. The dew pressed cold against my ankles. Shadows shifted with the faintest whisper, brushing the edges of vision. The prairie seemed endless. The eyes might return, or they might have always been here, watching in silence. Every blade of grass held a secret I could not uncover, a presence I could not name. I kept walking. The hum of the night pressed gently against my chest. The pale light of unseen eyes lingered in memory, patient, unyielding, eternal. I exhaled again. The prairie was alive, silent, hiding. And I was alone, carrying the echo of eyes that would never reveal their secrets. The prairie lay still, draped in fog, my boots pressed into the damp earth. The air smelled faintly of wet grass and cold wind. Footsteps followed, not behind me, not beside me, but with me. Every step I took mirrored perfectly. I paused. The echo paused. I exhaled, breath clouding in the chill. I moved faster. The echo matched me, quicker now, deliberate. The rhythm pressed against my chest, uneven, mocking. I tried to break stride. Ran. The echo raced, always just ahead. I slowed. It slowed. Every soft exhale carried weight. Every rustle seemed amplified. I crouched low, pressing palms into the wet soil. The echo followed, heavy, deliberate, even crawling. I could not escape its rhythm. The prairie stretched endless. Mist curled around my legs, clinging like cold fingers. Every shadow rippled in the corners of my vision. I dare not look back. Even in front, shapes bent unnaturally, bending with the fog. A soft static hummed through the air, vibrating through my bones. The echo shifted tempo, slower, then faster. It mocked the beat of my heart, each pulse resonating in the ground. I felt it, not sound, not sight, but in my skin, a vibration I could not shake. The grass whispered around my ankles. Something unseen shifted in the fog, brushing softly, circling unseen. The prairie smelled of earth and faint smoke, the night pressing close. I stood again, steps measured, cautious. The echo measured too, impossibly precise. I moved left. The echo moved left. I moved right. It matched me, always relentless. A single thought came, chilling, not following, not behind, beside me, inside me. I stopped entirely. Held breath. The echo stopped. Silence pressed into my ears. The prairie hummed faintly underfoot, grass bending in the cold wind. Then, a soft rustle just behind my shoulder. I did not turn. Could not. Yet I felt it, circling, patient, waiting for the next step. I moved forward, slowly, deliberately. The echo returned, heavy, mocking, unavoidable. Every blade of grass bent beneath invisible weight, whispering under my feet. The night stretched long and endless. Mist rose and curled around ankles, drifting higher with each cautious step. Every breath I drew carried the chill of the prairie, the weight of the unseen. I exhaled, soft, almost silent. The echo matched. Faster, slower, a heartbeat not my own. I pressed on. The horizon shimmered faintly with pale light, distant and empty. Yet the echo remained, tethered to my movement, haunting in its perfection. I dared to whisper. Nothing returned, only the soft beneath my feet. I realized then, the prairie had no exit, no refuge, no hiding, only rhythm. I stepped again. The echo stepped again. And I understood I was never alone, never truly alone. The fog swirled. The prairie held its breath. And the echo, patient and inevitable, continued. The prairie stretched wide, endless under the pale evening light. Mist curled over the grass, drifting in slow, curling fingers. I returned to where the cabin had stood. It was gone. Not broken, not hidden. Gone. In its place. Only tall grass swayed, whispering secrets to the wind. I stepped forward, boots sinking slightly into damp earth. The air smelled of smoke long gone, faint and ghostly, like a memory. A flicker of light caught my eye. Far, on the horizon, it trembled. Soft, almost hesitant, yet unmistakable. I froze. The grass rustled around my legs, low hums brushing my skin. I thought the cabin had vanished. But perhaps it had never been truly gone. Shadows stretched long beneath the fading sun. The mist rose, veiling the horizon in gray, curling and twisting. I felt eyes watching from somewhere beyond the fog, distant and patient. I moved closer to the light, each step muffled by the damp prairie. The wind whispered faintly, carrying hints of wood, of something burned, like the echo of a fire long extinguished. The empty space where the cabin should have been felt alive. Every stalk of grass seemed to sway toward me. I could sense the ground tremble beneath the soft hum of the prairie. I blinked. The light pulsed, as if breathing, and in the next instant it vanished. Silence pressed in, cold, heavy, almost soft against my ears. The prairie seemed to exhale, and the emptiness felt thicker. I turned slowly, searching for any trace. The wind shifted, brushing my hair, carrying whispers I could not catch. Every sense sharpened. The smell of earth, the chill of mist, the quiet hum beneath my feet. The light flickered again, faint, distant, teasing. I felt drawn to it, curiosity twisting uneasily with instinctive caution. The cabin, or whatever it was still there, somewhere between sight and memory. The horizon shimmered in wavering heat, though the air was cold. I realized the prairie itself seemed to breathe, holding and releasing the space where the cabin had stood. I stepped forward. Grass brushed my arms, damp and soft, whispering against my skin. The prairie stretched further, empty yet filled with the weight of unseen presence. Another flicker, closer this time, faintly orange against the gray dusk. It vanished when I blinked, leaving only the tremble of the grass. I stopped again. The silence was thick, a soft hum in my chest. Every instinct told me to leave, yet every sense drew me forward. The cabin might have vanished, or perhaps it was never truly gone at all. Somewhere in the shifting prairie, it waited. I exhaled, slow, careful. The fog curled higher, brushing ankles and knees. And the prairie whispered around me, patient, secretive, eternal. The prairie dimmed as dusk settled, casting long shadows over the tall, trembling grass. The wind whispered low, curling around my ankles, cold and hesitant. I noticed them first in the corners of my vision. Shadows twisting, stretching, impossible shapes that disappeared when I turned. Each blink changed them, yet their presence pressed closer. The ground beneath my boots hummed softly, almost pulsing. Rustling grass brushed my legs, damp, smelling faintly of earth and something older, stale, iron-heavy. I slowed, careful, breath shallow. Each step forward made the shadows move too. Closer, closer. I never saw them head-on. They avoided direct gaze, curling just beyond recognition. A silhouette shifted near the horizon. It was human-like, but wrong. Limbs bent in angles that felt unnatural, edges blurred like smoke. I froze. The wind died. The prairie held its breath. And the shadows stretched, curling toward me in silence. I tried to blink the fear away, but each blink revealed more. Forms leaning from nowhere. Soft hums, almost synchronized with my heartbeat. I stepped again. Soft footsteps in rhythm with mine, though no one followed. Grass rustled behind me, then to the side. A cold draft tickled my ear. Whispers, faint and fleeting, like words I almost understood. Shapes bent in impossible ways, writhing as if alive, folding into themselves. Every corner I glanced toward held movement. Every glance away left a stillness that pressed against my chest. I realized they were circling me, not in front, not behind. Always at the edges, watching, waiting. The horizon darkened. A pale, fading light made the shadows deepen, stretching like ink spilled across the grass. I crouched, pressing hands to the earth. The soil was cold, rough against my palms, and the shadows followed every tiny shift, every breath. The prairie hummed again, low and steady. The shapes bent closer, and for a moment I felt their curiosity as strongly as my fear. I dared not look directly. I dared not move. The corners held secrets I could not name. I exhaled, softly. The grass whispered around me, and the shadows seemed to pause, curling just beyond my vision. Even when I moved again, the shapes shifted with me. Not threatening, exactly. Not safe. Just present. The wind picked up. It carried the scent of damp earth and the faint metallic tang of something unseen. The shadows twisted once more, almost in farewell, before melting into the gathering night. I stood alone, palms pressed to the cold prairie, hearts echoing the hum beneath my feet, and the corners held only empty air. But I knew they were still there, waiting. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath a pale, waning sky. Evening carried a chill that seeped into my bones. Each blade of grass whispered against the wind, soft and restless. I reached what I thought was the edge, but the horizon only stretched farther, curling into itself. A haze shimmered along the distant line, like heat or memory. Shapes moved there, sometimes human, sometimes wrong. Limbs bent in ways that made my stomach tighten. I stepped forward. Grass rustled beneath my boots, damp with the scent of earth and frost. The shapes shifted when I blinked. They never stopped. I tried to walk faster. The wind shifted. A hum ran beneath my feet. Each pace carried the weight of unseen eyes. I stopped, and even then, the feeling of pursuit remained. Not chasing me exactly, just pressing, silent, patient. The air thickened. A faint metallic tang lingered with the scent of wet soil. Shadows danced at the edge of the haze, twisting, folding, always watching. I turned my head. The shapes melted into the horizon, then returned when I looked away. I could feel them moving in rhythm with my heartbeat. My hands brushed against the grass. Cold, rough, almost clammy. Each touch echoed with the prairie's quiet hum, the distant rustle of unseen feet. I dared not speak. Even breath felt too loud. The wind whispered over the plain, carrying nothing, yet everything. I moved again. The horizon didn't change. The shapes didn't retreat. Each step forward felt like circling in place. Light faded to silver, then gray. The prairie held me in a gentle, suffocating silence. Eyes that weren't eyes watched from the distance. I could feel their awareness, patient and endless. I stopped to listen. The hum beneath my feet thrummed softly. The air carried a faint, almost imperceptible pulse. I realized it moved with me, faster when I slowed, quieter when I ran. I could see nothing clear, only shapes shifting at the horizon, mirrored by my own shadow stretching into infinity, alone yet accompanied. The night thickened. Fog rolled low, curling around ankles and knees, dragging the scent of wet earth and decay. The horizon trembled in pale light, never yielding, never ending. I breathed slowly, cold air stinging my lungs, heart beating in sync with the prairie's silent rhythm. Every step forward felt borrowed. I realized something. The prairie does not let go, not of the living, not of the wandering. It holds, patient and unyielding, watching from every shimmer, every shadow, every ripple of the grass. And I understood then that walking does not escape it. Only moving endlessly keeps the shapes at the edge, just out of reach, just beyond the horizon. I stopped again. Silence pressed close, heavy and damp. The shapes didn't vanish. They waited, and in the hush of that infinite prairie, I felt the endless horizon watching me back. The night was quiet, heavy with cold. Frost traced the edges of the prairie, and the wind carried a faint metallic tang. I returned to my truck. Its engine hummed faintly beneath the hood. I thought the sense of being watched would leave me here, but it lingered. Shadows clung to the tires, to the door handles, to the empty space between the truck and the dark horizon. I slid into the seat. The leather smelled of damp earth and winter frost. My hands rested on the wheel, but the prairie's gaze felt pressed against my back. The rear view mirror caught movement. Pale eyes shimmered in the darkness behind me. Not far away, not close enough to be real. I blinked. They stayed. Silent, patient, unyielding. The faint glow reflected in the glass, a whisper of something waiting. I drove. The tires pressed the frozen ground, crunching softly, but the eyes followed in rhythm with my pulse. Every turn of the wheel, every stretch of road, their gaze lingered, patient and quiet. The truck's warmth contrasted with the cold air seeping through the cracks. Breath fogged the windows. I tried to shake the feeling. Every glance back confirmed it. They were there. The hum beneath the wheels seemed to echo with something else. Soft steps, a dragging, distant rhythm that matched the pulse of the prairie. I could feel it in my chest, in the back of my neck, as though the presence had moved with me from the horizon to here. I passed landmarks I knew. Familiar trees, bent and twisted by wind. The road curved, and the shadows moved with the flicker of my headlights. Each blink revealed them closer, then further, then closer again. I didn't dare stop. Every halt seemed to pull the eyes nearer. Even in motion, they stayed, not chasing, not leaving, just patient. A faint rustling drifted through the air. Not wind, not wildlife. Something deliberate. The hairs on my arms stood straight. My fingers tightened on the wheel. I realized I didn't need to see it fully. Its presence was enough. Every sense tingled with it. Sight, sound, even smell of cold earth and shadow. It waited, biding its time for another night, another prairie, another traveler. The road stretched ahead, empty yet alive with anticipation. Every mile forward felt borrowed. The horizon behind the mirror seemed infinite, holding secrets in the pale gleam of those eyes. I accepted it then. The prairie's gaze does not vanish. It follows, patient, silent, unbroken. Not angry, not cruel, just watching. The mirror shimmered faintly again. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I could feel it there. The truck hummed beneath me. Engine, tires, frost-cracked asphalt. The night wrapped around, tight and still. Eyes that followed me home, always waiting. And I understood some presences are endless, like the prairie itself. I drove on, slowly, quietly, under the watch of those pale, unwavering eyes.